So I want to tell you about my mother, Joan Burstyn, who you can see there, although her picture says Harold Burstyn. And Mum, you should tilt your camera down a little bit so we can see your beautiful face. Very good, thank you. And in a moment, we're going to put the spotlight on her because she's going to read the first two poems. So you know that she is a professor emerita at Syracuse University, was a senior researcher in education for many years, and she's now retired, and because she is not the youngest person in the room. Um, but in addition to her academic achievements, she's the author of 4 books of poetry. Treasures Stored for Winter in 2014, Path into the Sun 2009, Waiting for the Lame Horse 1987, and Song Cycle, her first book of poetry written in 1976. She was awarded the 2007 Milton Dorfman Poetry Prize, and as a contributor to the Women's Voices radio CD that won a 2007 Clarion Award from the Women in Media. So just to remind everybody, you can introduce yourselves in the chat. And so I'm just going to read one thing that somebody wrote. Ferris Olin, who's a friend of Joan's, wrote, Joan Burstyn views the stuff of our daily lives with keen observation, rendered in thoughtful expression. These lyrical poems remind us that the life cycle and our emotional reactions to everyday occurrences bring to the surface love, memories, regret, and thoughts of life's ending. An inspiring book. She wrote about, I believe, about Path into the Sun. But we're going to begin with Song Cycle, Mom's first book that she published in 1976 when she had 3 obstreperous teenagers in the house. And nevertheless, she succeeded in getting a book out with the help of some good friends.
Yes, so I'm going to read a poem called Moonshot. And I want to explain to you very briefly that I perceived the space program as being part of a whole movement which was almost linked with the machismo of the Second World War and the way in which one perceived the actual power of the people who were able to express themselves sexually in a way that they had not previously. And Moonshot, January 1969. Fertility rites are dead. The constant beat in the blood of drums, the stamping feet, the beat, the feet, the rush of blood pulsating through the dancing men, the orgasm, all dead. Fertility rites are dead. We are supplicants no more. Our deeds affirm our strength in a universe of stone. The ancients sang of human love, but we have celebrated cosmic coitus. Fertility rites are dead. We watch, we do not dance. We watch the tension build. We watch the countdown and the blast off into space. One vast ejaculation watched by a community of eyes. Man's wild, exultant sperm in the vagina of the universe. Fertility rites are dead. Mass eroticism is dead. We are sophisticated. We are clean. We inherit the universe. We wait now, relaxed for the moment of conception. Then man-made sperm shall penetrate the moon. And in that day, the sexless shall know sex, and God shall be called man. That was written maybe 6 months before the actual landing on the moon. So the second poem is really a poem that is a critique of what was expected of women once they were married in the United States at that time. So it's written, I guess, also in that period around the 1960s. Suburban syndrome. Sad is the muse in the daytime, lounging in the sunlight, waiting for a ride to the busy town, away from here, where the sunlight beats on the windows of the houses each day like clockwork, except when it rains or snows. And the slow women walk to the stores for bread and ice cream and meat and talk about prices. The big rise in prices, like a cake in the oven, going up and up and up in the heat. Well, that's prices for you. Women running the town, really. Some in the post office, some in the stores, meekly adding goods, the cash register, some taking calls on the phone. The doctor, oh, he's busy at the moment. The principal, oh, he's busy now. Let me listen to your complaint. And there, like doormats on the floor, waiting for the feet to wipe themselves upon them, there lie the women, row upon row, in doormat-like submission.
Okay, now we're going to hear a poem from the same book called Autumn in the Tea Garden, which is going to be read by Gabby. So I'm going to take the spotlight off Joan and put the spotlight.
Can you tell everybody who Gabby is?
Yes, put the spotlight on Gabby. And I'm going to say this, that in the summers in Woods Hole, almost every summer, Joan has been doing a poetry reading, at least I would guess for the last 20 years, and sharing the poetry stage with young poets from Woods Hole, and also with her grandchildren, my kids when they're there, and Gabby and Sasha more often. And so here Gabby is going to read Autumn in the Tea Garden.
Okay. Autumn in the Tea Garden. Simple sounds under the sun turn to tune of melody beyond belief. Grief is scarcely known there beside the watercress beds, where tears are lost in the water below the roots. And in the days of the murmurous fall, all is one receive flood of blue and purple, filching the beauty of the burnished trees until the world is a kaleidoscope of color.
And now Gail is going to read the last poem from this collection.
So this poem is called Modern Psalm, and it's one of my favorite poems from this collection. And before I ever was so interested in psalms from the Bible, I always loved this poem. Modern Psalm. How shall I ask for salvation? How find the way to ask for guidance from my God? Men embrace conformity, and to what end? That we have roads like sores infested with 1,000 bugs, screens soothing as sirens, and a passion for possessions. I have traveled and I have watched, but why I have been and why I have seen, I know not. And always from within a voice cries, buy a new car, travel farther, buy a new screen, see brighter. And I reply, these forms are meaningless, empty as milk bottles beside the door. But the voice says, buy this. They say no better cure exists for ulcers and for thoughts. When I cry unto the Lord in a loud voice, deliver me from my predicament. My friends go one by one out of the door, murmuring of maladjustment. How shall I find salvation?
So the second book that Mom published is called Waiting for the Lame Horse. And this was published 10 years later, so in 1987. So technology had advanced a little bit. Sadly, the man who ran the press in Woods Hole had passed on, but other people were able to help her move move this forward. And someone suggested, in the meantime, Mom, maybe you will tell us a little bit about the artwork that is in the book, because that, I think, is very important as well.
Yes, the poetry book was put together at the very end of the use of manual technology to write books. And so I had the opportunity to work with people in the art department at the university and to include in the top of the pages for each of the poems some pictures which were actually taken from different abstract paintings that I had done, drawings that I had done. And I actually still have on some shelf that somebody's going to have to look at one day and do something with, the metal tablets that we actually worked on so that they made the imprints for both the print and for the tops of the pictures. And the book was brought out by a press which was run, Bellmead Press, which was run by a friend of ours from Woods Hole, who was in the summer in Woods Hole, but in the wintertime was in New Jersey. And the press was the Bellmead Press in New Jersey. And he was the poet who always spoke every summer in Woods Hole for many decades. And I took over when he stopped doing that, doing poetry readings with the children and with the adults in the area for years. So this is a poem which is entitled Sonata of a Bag Lady in the New York Public Library. I want to say two things about the poem. One is, firstly, that the poem was written particularly concerning the amount of, I would say, people living on the street during that period in the cities that I visited. And this particular bag lady was in the New York Public Library. And I sort of thought, well, if she's in the New York Public Library, she must be an educated person. And she was sitting opposite me, and she had taken off her shoes. And I was looking at her and wrote the poem in her voice, looking at me. So this is the way in which I've written this poem. It's called a persona poem, and in this book of my poems, I wrote several poems which were taking on the role of different people. And this is called Sonata of a Bag Lady in the New York Public Library. And the background is that clearly she must be an educated person, but she's living on the street. The person opposite watches my feet laid out upon my pawn shop sneakers. She stares, her stares prick my toes like pins. Toes free to stretch, no longer bent to work like seamen below deck on a schooner, or captives shackled to their oars in ancient quinquiremes, day in, day out, rowing, rowing. Toes free on the marble floor, free from the pavement's heat, burning my soles like hellfire, licking relentlessly the feet of sinners, free from the pain of calluses, grown purple and luxuriant as garbage bags on sidewalks, where newspapers piled high as pillows on my roadside bed, my toes then curled in their alien prisons for the night. Toes free as fingers on piano keys, now playing a sonata silently upon my sneakers. The person opposite stares. Her eyes round up my errant toes, return them to captivity again. She does not heed the music they have made. Daniel, I think, is going to read a poem, another poem, which is also a Sona poem, and it's a tree speaking.
So I chose this poem because many of you know that I divide my time. Half of the time I spend working as a rabbi, and half of the time I spend working as the landscaping manager of the kibbutz. And I have great attachment to the trees in the kibbutz, and several large trees have fallen this year. One was fallen by a storm, and one was fallen by a planning decision that I was not happy with. So I thought this was an appropriate thing. And I would also mention that I think someone said, Mom, that said to you that the family felt like a forest of tall trees, and now there are fewer and fewer. So,
Yes, that was Michael Brompton's view of the world.
yeah, okay. Lament of a Felled Tree. Roots firm, I stand a sentinel beside the driveway. My trunk a specter that I feel stretched far above me, as a human feels a severed limb. My 80 years laid out like bands on an LP record. Warm, moist summers amplified, horses tied to my trunk stamping the ground impatiently, cars in a game of chicken racing downhill at midnight, ice storms recalled in brittle clarity, crystals breaking my limbs. Children breathing fire grab my trunk, fall against me laughing. Birds, preoccupied, descend on me at sunset, and hurricanes, crescendos of despair, dash against my branches like a woman driven to madness, screaming insults at a world unheeding.
So when we talk about tall trees in the family, we also talk about long marriages in this family. We have, all our aunts and uncles and our parents were very blessed with long marriages, as well as many of their aunts and uncles and parents. And the other thing we learned from our parents is that marriage isn't always easy. So the other thing is that during this pandemic, people who are married to each other and people with their kids are with each other all the time. But, before the pandemic, it wasn't always like that. And there was a time when my parents started to live in different places during the week, and my dad would come home on weekends. And this is a poem that my mom wrote about that. It's called Armor. So you went away. I went to the closet, pulled out my suit of armor, and brushed off the dust. When I put it on, I found my shape had changed in 18 years. The plates grated under the tension, and parts of my flesh protruded. But the armor felt good, and I wore it all week. At the weekend, you returned. Hi, you called from the door. What are you wearing? Take it off. I'm home. I'll look after you. You repeated the phrase you have used so often. I'll look after you. I found an ant on the floor and slowly twisted my foot on it. I avoided your eyes. I don't think I will take off the suit. It's heavy to take off. Besides, it's comfortable. Come, you said, I'll undress you. You wore your armor when we first met. Come, take it off. When you went away after the weekend, I put my armor on again. And when you came home on Friday, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a metallic glint upon your chest.
Okay, so now we're going to have a musical interlude. I hope that I can do this right. So first I need to go over here.
Explain. Can I explain a bit about it, Daniel, or are you going? Do you know?
Yes.
This is
Please.
Various times I've handed my books of poems to different members of the family or anybody else who's interested in seeing them, and said, do something with them, whatever you like. And this was one that was taken away by my brother Ronnie's grandson, Ben Worrell Jacobs, and he turned this into a piece of music that he wrote himself using the words of my poem. And I've got 5 poems that have actually been set to music by other people. We're going to have only 2 of them today composed. We've got. But this is by Ben Jacobs. Ben Jacobs, I'm sorry.
Oh, wait a sec. I need to go.
You might need to stop the screen share and then share the sound with the thing.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, share computer sound. Okay, just let me know if Gabby, I can see you on my screen. So if the music isn't coming out, let me know.
I'm afraid of letting go. My moorings hold me safe. If I let go, I might be blown downstream. Afraid of letting go. My moorings hold me safe. If I let go, I might be blown downstream. Downstream. I'll be blown away from reason. I'll be blown away from reason. I'll be blown away from reason. Be blown away from reason. Like Mississippi flood waters, my desires press hard at their backs. I feel the pressure building. I feel the pressure building. Levees collapsing with the waves. I feel the pressure building. I feel the pressure building. Levees collapsing with the waves. Flood water surging. Flood water surging. Flood water surging. I'll be blown away from reason. Be blown away from reason. I'll be blown away from reason. Be blown away from reason.
That's fabulous. I don't know whether Ben goes under the name of Ben Worrell or Ben Worrell Jacobs, or I don't know if anybody is here to tell us. Mark, are you here? I don't know.
He's called Crackerzat.
What?
Crackerzat?
Crackerzat.
How do you spell that?
Can you post it in the chat for us?
Okay.
I'll post it in the chat. Yeah, that's his pseudonym for all his music work, Crackerzat.
And his brother has also taken another poem of mine and set drawings to it, and that's fabulous as well. But I couldn't include that for this session.
So this third book of poems is called Path into the Sun. And the first poem, called Forgiveness, will be read by my sister-in-law, Eliza. And then there will be 2 more poems from this book read by Mom. Now, these poems span from 1985 to 2006. And I don't know if you know, but 1985 was an important year for my parents because that was the year that they moved to Syracuse. And during this time was also the time that my mother was dean, and then she wasn't dean anymore, which was a huge, I don't know what to call it, a huge event in her life. And she wrote many fabulous poems out of her experience of being dean and then not being dean. And so we'll be hearing some things that she wrote during that period.
Hi, everybody. The poem is called Forgiveness. It begins with a quote from Diane de Prima's Loba. In whose dream did she beg forgiveness? In whose did she die alone? The princess, far from home, bereft of all the trappings of her palace, walls bare, no tapestries, no paintings of gold leaf, crimson and sapphire blue, but beige and flat, her life like vinegar sharp and sour. The princess dreamed she begged forgiveness. Waking, surprised, she sought the person to forgive her, sought in vain, scouring the corners of her mind. Another night she slept restless, like the princess in the story writhing on top of the pea. She dreamed and died without companion and without tranquility. She died alone and unforgiven. Next morning when she woke, she stood before the mirror and recognized the person she was seeking.
Thank you, Eliza, for that. I have to say that I found that is a poem that reflects enormously on many people, in the sense that it's only when we learn to forgive ourselves for not achieving what we might have achieved, or for all the things that we don't do, or we haven't done, or which circumstances cause us not to have done, can we really move on in life. And lots of people I've discovered in my career of helping people go through their lives find it very difficult to forgive themselves for anything. But when you look at the ways in which the world works and the enormous numbers of influences that are outside your own control within your life, you realize that you don't have very much opportunity always to control everything that's going on. And it's very important to learn how to be forgiving to yourself. So that poem has been something that I particularly find important to other people's lives as well as my own. But the other thing that I wanted to say was that I'm moving on now to the way in which you move on. Just let me explain that when I went to take the deanship that I had at Syracuse University, I had no idea of the financial crises that were going on for the university. I thought I did, but I didn't. And it was clear to me that I was not going to be able to achieve the kinds of things for the school that I had wanted to. In retrospect, I think I have a different view of what went on then than I did at that time, and could say that there are some very important ways in which what is the School of Education at Syracuse University now depended on what happened during those few years that I was dean. But I want to take the other poem, which is called The Way Out of, really the way out of situations where things don't turn out the way you want them to. And this is called Path into the Sun, and is the title of the whole book. Wind blown, swept like last year's leaves across the brickyards, discarded, left rotting under the sun, putrid after rain, turned brown and soggy, filled with insects. Filled with new life, slugs and fruit flies, mildewed, grown lush with moss, lichens, brown mushrooms curling at the edges, purple flowers, tendrils and slender leaves, spiders' webs caught in sun with droplets of dew hanging from each, a crystal chandelier. A chandelier lighted by candles, beneath the swaying crowd of dancers, each painted with color, rich velvets, silk and music, low, delicate strains from harp and clavichord. A minuet, steady, constrained, and safe, all in order, like jewelry laid out in its case, each cushion filled with diamonds and pearls. Order, orderliness, order and safety. Order like the notes scribbled by a waitress, 1 egg up, toast, 2 coffees with cream, or turkey on rye, Tom's, no mayo. Order, direction, a way to go, a path out of the woods, out of the forest, into the sun, the warmth, the light, blue sky, grass, and butterflies. And then a later poem that I won an international prize for, which was an interesting event for me, because I decided that I would write a poem for the competition by taking the words of another poet and building on them. So it's called The Water, it's a much later poem, and it's called The Water That I Swim In. And I took some words by Marge Piercy out of a book of hers called The Art of Blessing the Day. I don't know if you know her poems, but they're a wonderful selection of poems. And she has 2 lines in it that I took and built on. And the 2 lines are, at the moment, I find myself under the water of my past, trying to breathe in that thick, refracted medium. So here I was, myself, finding myself at that moment under the water of my past, trying to breathe. And here are my thoughts about it. I thought that I could pick and choose which moments of my past I have as my companions now, that was my future then. I thought that I would keep the water clear by adding new, fresh streams to some small residue of what I'd left behind. But I was wrong. All moments past make up the water that I swim in, spatter my eyes and block my view, or dangle from my hair, entangle me in that which was, when I would swim to what must lie ahead. Would that I could add more fresh spring water to this brew. Would that I could pay a sum to an environmental group to clean up the pollution of my past. Would that I could swim ahead clear-sighted instead of darkly through this stew.
That was fantastic, Mom. I love that. Okay, so now we're moving on to the book Treasures Stored for Winter. And Treasures Stored for Winter. And Judith wanted to say something about the book. Judith?
I'm on the back of it.
Okay, so I have the book. Can you see me, I hope? Here's the book. And Mummy, I don't know, where does this photograph come from? Is it Green Lakes?
No, It was on a set of photographs they sent me from the place that was putting the book together. And I
Okay.
come of it.
Well, it's a very beautiful picture, and it shows a lake in winter, which is very appropriate for Wisconsin. And also reminds me of Green Lakes, which was near where Mommy and Daddy lived in Syracuse. That was a lovely place to go walking. But what I wanted to show you, so on the back, there's a wonderful picture of Mommy and Gabby at a poetry reading many years ago when Gabby was quite young, taken by Joanne. And that's exemplary of these poetry readings that Mommy used to do, and where all the grandchildren would participate. And David and his friends would always come to the poetry readings too, in the years when we were in Woods Hole, and then more recently, Gabby and Sasha have been there. And David will always come when they're there for the poetry readings. So this is the fourth of the books, and this one was fully electronically published. Is that correct, Mommy, in the sense that it was all typeset and everything electronically in the modern era?
Right. And I think, is David one of the people who's on this particular thing that's going on now? Is David here among us?
I think David is here. I saw him.
David is here, yes.
David is the only person who this book was on display in Los Angeles. Yeah. It's one big opening, and David was there to see it and sent photos of himself with the book. So, do you recall that, David?
Yeah, I think, wasn't it like the USC Book Fair? Or it was some New York Times thing, right?
Right, yes.
And we're going to hear 4 poems from this book. And we're very happy that our friend Jake Bakalar has agreed to read one of the poems. He's going to be the first one, which is The Egg of the World.
The egg of the world cracks, and the epigraph is from a Marge Piercy poem. The egg of the world cracks raggedly open, and the wet, scraggly chick of northern spring emerges, gaunt, dripping. And here's the poem now by Joan Burstyn. Before the egg cracks, we who have endured winter storms huddle in our anoraks, stomping through snow grown shoddy on the sidewalks, gray and greasy. Our boots marked white with salt in lines uneven as those made by the sea as frothy waves lap slowly onto shore. And so the egg has cracked raggedly open. The spring stands unsteadily checking out the landscape, retreating toward its shell in terror. And we shiver still in the damp, search the almanac for signs that summer, yes, summer, will soon follow. Only wait now, wait, for surely the chick will grow stronger.
Beautiful, thank you, Jake. And the next poem from this book will be read by Mom. It's called Rage Constrained.
Yes, this is another political poem in many ways, and it reflects my sense of deep concern for the racial divisions within the country. If the mixture of my thoughts, my rage against the inhumanities we perpetrate, we humans, not just those abroad, those in foreign lands where children starve or run in terror ahead of those who torture them, not only those, but here, within our own cities, towns, where poverty breeds despair, deep, deep despair. If my rage were to spew forth, mine, a white middle-class rage, would it be heard? Would it be found authentic? Or would it be dismissed? How can you understand, you surrounded by privilege, you feeling our hurt vicariously? A knot winds itself in my stomach like a ball of fire, intense and burning. I cannot vocalize it, cannot say how deep the pain is that I feel.
The next poem will be read by Judith, and it's called Between Friends.
So this is a perfect poem for the fall in Wisconsin, although I will say that we are having a very unnaturally warm moment. And hopefully you can see some of the things behind me that are referred to in this poem as I sit in my garden without a coat. Our conversation meanders like a lazy stream, edged by tall grasses, hiding burrows of water rats and moles, and bullfrogs camouflaged as stones, croaking to each other across the water, intermittent as two foghorns. We have hidden burrows in our lives, mistakes we buried, quick as a squirrel, and treasures stored for winter, concealed where tall grasses grow. Our conversations meander past each one. Our words, like water, smooth the edges, penetrate the crevices, and leave us free to float on down the stream.
I think that's such a beautiful poem for right now, because as well as having so many wonderful relatives on this call, we also have on this Zoom, we have so many wonderful friends from over the years. And that poem really speaks to the conversations and connections that we've been able to maintain, just across so many decades. We're actually arriving at our last poem, or our next to last poem, which Mom will read, and it's called Shortcomings. And then we will hear, to conclude, we will hear another musical selection. So Mom, if you would like to read Shortcomings, and then maybe tell us something about the song, the musical selection, March Day.
Okay. Shortcomings is a poem I've written not too long ago. And it's really sort of looking at how we maybe have taken different routes than we might have done. We haven't achieved everything we wanted maybe to set out to do, but at the same time, we have come to an enormous amount of richness just by the way we have gone. So this is called this is taken from, again, 2 lines from Laura Riding, who wrote a poem called The Way It Is. And her lines read, "It falls to many to be blessed in their shortcomings." And I just pass that on to you as something to think about. Think that you too maybe consider yourself blessed by your shortcomings. Do not deride things that you've done. Do not do feeling that you haven't achieved everything you set out to do. Just understand you may have been blessed by your shortcomings. Look, the clouds race across the sky like children chasing a squirrel. I stand to watch. I feel the wind that turns the trees into flamenco dancers, tossing their skirts as they twirl. Were I so sure that I was right, so very sure I knew the only way, perhaps I wouldn't follow after side tracks, paths well worn but narrow, filled with colored flowers, ones that beckon me despite their placement off the road. Were I so sure that I was right, so very sure I knew the only way, perhaps I would just travel there once without a stop, follow the interstate and drive for 12 hours, straight with never a look at the view, never a chance to check the roses, smell the grass, or foot over the fields. And the last poem, I guess that is the last poem. So now we come to the music. I don't know who's got the music.
Yes, but Mom, do you want to say something something about the music of March Day.
Yes. March Day is one of the very early poems that I wrote in England. And the music was written by Jonathan Dinkin, who is a musician, composer, who I know from Syracuse and whose work is quite well known. And he took that poem and set it to music. And Robert Lieberman, who I hope is he here today? I don't know whether he is.
No, I don't think he could be here, Mom.
Okay. He is a wonderful cantor, and he has a beautiful voice, and he and Jonathan set it to music, and the music he was assisted on the violin by another friend of mine, and then Robert Lieberman said that he would sing it. And so this is the music that has been recorded and is part of Jonathan Dinkin's collection of his musical works.
Yeah, I think the CD is called Honorable Mention.
That's right.
And it's a beautiful CD. It's mostly Jewish music. And this is one of the few songs that wasn't specifically Jewish. And honestly, when I first heard it, I thought, this sounds familiar. It must be a very famous song. And then I realized it was Mom's poem.
Okay.
Seen the sun on budding branches and grass yielding before the wind. I have watched the snowdrops bow down their head and the crocuses smile golden and purple. I have trodden at other times over springy tussocks, which shield the crisp leaves of a long forgotten summer. Yet this is not the same. This first fine day has set up such a tune of life and love, such joy of birds and a forgotten simple sounds. My body dances quite unbidden to harmony with things. I am bewitched.
That was great. Thank you for playing that. I also want to thank everybody who's here. I'm speechless, really, except that I'm not because I'm talking, but it's been wonderful.
Well, we just want to thank everybody so much for coming, and Daniel for putting this together, and all the readers, Jake and Eliza and Judith and Daniel, and this was, and Gabby, this was absolutely fantastic and more fun than I thought it would be, and we'll probably be doing it again.